Crandall. I am the Education Coordinator at Missoula Aging Services. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this workshop with the Alzheimer's Association. I want to make sure I give our guest here a wonderful introduction. This is Lynn Maloney Cabrera. Lynn is the Executive Director of Alzheimer's Association Montana Chapter. She's worked with the association since 2006. The Alzheimer's Association strives to increase Alzheimer's awareness, provide services and resources for people affected by the disease, elevate public policy, and advance dementia research. The Alzheimer's Association advocates for research to prevent, treat, and ultimately cure dementia. Maloney is passionate about this cause and quickly points out that in a state like Montana, with more rural communities, the support offered through the Alzheimer's Association is crucial. She describes pockets of excellence in Alzheimer's and dementia care in our Missoula and sees that we still have a long way to go. Maloney is one of 3 full-time employees in this entire state, and as you can imagine, she has much ground to cover, both geographically and theoretically. I also want to give special thanks to our sponsors and supporters, the Montana Geriatric Education Center. Terry, can you raise your hand? Terry Eakin, thank you. We received a grant to bring Lynn and her staff to Missoula to do this workshop here today, as well as we have one at Big Sky High School tomorrow. I also want to thank, of course, the Alzheimer's Association staff, Lynn and Nick, Missoula Aging Services, the Missoula Senior Center, and Missoula Community Access Television. Thank you, Ron, for being here. So with that said, I welcome Lynn.
I have to pull my handy little podium over. So the nice thing about an event at the Senior Center is there's an abundance of these little rolling podiums. Thank you for that warm welcome, Alicia. I just have grown so fond of any opportunity that brings me here to Missoula. Here's where I went to college, so you can see why it has a special place in my heart, but I'm also just completely overwhelmed and encouraged by the wonderful work that is happening here in this community, in large part led by Missoula Aging Services and other community partners like the Food Bank, thank you, Michelle, and like the individuals that have helped establish a dementia-friendly Missoula. So you all are leading the way, and not just in Montana, but in many places throughout the United States. They don't have anything that has gotten this conversation, this dialogue underway at a community level like it needs to happen. And why does it need to happen? I'm going to tell you some things you already know. Alzheimer's is the epidemic of our generation. There are currently 5.7 million people in the United States living with Alzheimer's or some other type of dementia under that dementia umbrella. Alzheimer's happens to be the most prevalent, the one we hear about most commonly. But there are 5.7 million people dealing with Alzheimer's or some type of dementia. And oftentimes when people think about Alzheimer's or dementia, they think about our seniors. And sometimes they stop thinking when they get to that place, as though our seniors are somehow a disposable part of our society and don't merit the attention that this requires. I shared this with you. I had a friend once who said, if Alzheimer's happened to children, if we were worried about children losing their memories, losing their ability, their faculty, this is a conversation we would have put an end to years ago. We wouldn't tolerate it. Alzheimer's is of the top 10 diseases that take people's lives. It is the only one that has no way to stop it, no way to slow it down, and no way to prevent it. Not yet, but we're working on that. So let me stop real quick and ask, how many of you have taken part in the Walk to End Alzheimer's? It happens here every fall. Lots of you. I see the case management caregiving table, thank you. They're one of the community organizers for it. By coming to the Walk to End Alzheimer's, by joining literally hundreds of your friends and family members from across the community, you're doing something so powerful to help raise awareness, to help put a stake in the ground that says we are not okay with this, we are not going to tolerate this. We are going to join the movement that creates the day when Alzheimer's is something people used to get. So for those of you that have been to the walk, you'll forgive me. I'm going to go through this really quick, okay? When you come to the walk, the very first thing that we ask you is, can we ask why you're here? Are you a person that is just a caring member of the community, has no specific connection to the cause, but you want to help create a world without Alzheimer's? And if that's the case, the flower we give you is orange. If you're an individual who is caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's, maybe they live across the country, maybe they live in your home. If you're an Alzheimer's or related dementia caregiver, the color of flower you have is yellow. If you're a person who has lost someone to this disease, the color of your flower is purple. And if you're a person who's living with this disease, the color of your flower is blue. It creates a very somber, but also very celebratory opportunity for us to realize that we're all brought together under different circumstances. I mean, just look around the room. Some of these folks, you know, some of them you're seeing for the first time. This disease has brought us all together. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm also grateful for those of you who have helped support the walk, because it is those dollars you raise that help make events like this possible, evenings like this together. And I invite you certainly to look into coming to the walk. You won't be surprised to find that I have some information about it. So you can grab some from us or at the table on your way out. What we're going to talk about this evening is understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. And I take just the tiniest bit of pause to the word behaviors, because as we're talking about people who are living with the altered state that is Alzheimer's or another dementia, it's not so much a behavior like they're trying to be difficult or that they're trying to act out. Their entire reality has been very shaken to the core. Their ability to communicate, their ability to understand their experience, all of that has been compromised by this disease that is claiming their brain, ultimately claiming their life. And so as they have quote unquote behaviors, it really is just their way of communicating. Okay? So we're going to spend some time talking about that. We're going to spend some time talking about what are the 5 most typical sorts of ways that they might communicate through the behavior. And by the time we're done this evening, you'll also have identified what are those behaviors. How do we determine what might be bringing those about? And also, how do we mitigate them? How do we address them? And how do we prepare for the next time that they happen? Because we can pretty well bet that a person who is caught in that repetitious cycle of questioning, that's not going to be the first or the last time that that happens, right? So how do we prepare for that next time so we can have a better outcome, but ultimately so that they can have a better outcome, okay? So we don't have the advantage of a PowerPoint because of technology, but you do have a workbook, and this is yours to take home, okay? So I'm just going to review quickly some of, again, as we're talking about behaviors, we recognize that most typically as an individual is exhibiting some of these communications expressed through behaviors, they're no longer in the early stages of the disease, most typically. You'll see them more frequently in the middle stages of the disease. And those of you who have done some reading about the, the early and the mild, or the early and the moderate and the late stage of the disease, know that that's a very imprecise science, and that people move through those stages at different rates of speed. And so we just share this with you to kind of raise your awareness, okay? Raise your consciousness about it. So as we talked about some of the things that a person might be experiencing, that they have a difficult time even realizing that this is what they're experiencing, it might be simple things like hunger or thirst. They might be too warm, they might be too cold, right? They might have indigestion, they might have constipation. These are all things that if we were to experience them, we would both be able to assign the meaning to what we're experiencing, and we'd be able, for the most part, to adjust the circumstance to make ourselves more comfortable. Okay, so now in this state where the person in your care, the person that you love, is experiencing this discomfort, but they can't really put their finger on it, right? Maybe they're not even as verbal as they once were, and so they're not even able to explain it. Other things that can cause communication through behaviors, they might be overstimulated. They might be understimulated. They might be sad or lonely. They might be afraid. So you can see that there is a lot caught up in this. And because they haven't the capacity to do a whole lot to help us break it down, the obligation, the opportunity is ours to kind of figure out what might be going on for them. So we've actually developed kind of a process for this. So in your workbooks, just on page 2, you'll see a little 4-cornered diagram, and it walks you through the 4 different steps. Now, obviously, this is just an exercise. After you've done it a few times, it'll become a little bit more rote. You won't need to literally take out your workbook every time. But like all things you try to develop as a habit, this will help you with that. So the first thing that you want to do with an individual who is having some behavior is you're going to want to detect and connect. That's what you read in your workbook. It says, join the person in their reality. So for a moment, sort of put yourself in what you know to be true and what you know to be logical aside and literally put yourself in their shoes. So how many of you have tried that and found that it's not as easy as it sounds? Or you can try it once when you're well rested and kind of on the top of your game, but then later it's like, oh gosh, I'm exhausted. I don't really have the patience for this, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle some of that when we don't really feel like we can bring our best self. We know this, though, in the detect and connect, that the one thing that you can do that is so powerful is to meet them where they are. And literally, this is going to be hard because I have a microphone. I can do this. Literally, if they're having some agitation and you were to go to them, you wouldn't go to them and lean over them, because what would that be like? That's imposing and not warm and welcoming. But if I were to lean down and go, hello, see?
Hi, Nan.
Exactly, hi Nan, how are you? She takes my hand, we make eye contact, we have a moment where she realizes I'm not hovering over her, excuse me for that, I'm not hovering over her, I'm not being an imposing presence, I'm not sneaking up behind her accidentally, which is also not advised, is it? But I'm in front of her, I'm eye level to her, I reach out my hand to her, and it is innate in us to reach our hand back, even late in the disease process. When you establish that kind of rapport, that kind of situation with somebody, they'll reach their hand back. I don't take her hand, I don't touch her first, I allow her to create that connection. So the very first thing that I've done, hopefully, is communicated, I'm here, I'm right here, I'm smiling. I had a person at a talk say, I try to come with an open face. And I thought that's so nice. Just try to come with an open face, which communicates, I don't really know what's going on for you, but I'm here to help, and we're going to work this through together, okay? So that's kind of the first wonderful thing that we can do. The second thing that we can do is we don't necessarily want to assume, because frequently we will not make the correct assumption, and we will try to fix something that maybe isn't the problem, and what that communicates is, I don't really understand what's going on for you, I just want to make this go away, right? So it's okay to say, I don't really know what's going on for you, but I'm here to help, and we're going to figure this out together. They may not understand all the words, but what's the one thing they will understand? The tone of your voice, the smile, the open face, right? The intention. So the first thing step 1, this detect and connect, is as you're kind of doing this assessment, you're kind of also being a bit of a detective, and you're thinking, okay, what happened? Who was in the space right before this behavior began? And is there a pattern to when this behavior begins? Let's say it's suspicions. That's a not unusual one. And so if you're seeing a pattern to it, it's like, well, is there a pattern to who was in the room before this behavior happens? Is it a person maybe that might be bringing about this trigger? Is it a specific time of day? Is it a specific thing, like before bath, before a meal, after a meal? What can you know about what precipitated this? And what happened just after the behavior began? What was the person experiencing? And you just take in all of these clues and you kind of develop kind of a hypothesis about it. So as you're connecting with this person, you begin, as I said, by being directly in front of them, and you've made this eye contact. And as you're doing that now, you're taking into consideration what are the physical clues or cues that are apparent to you, okay? So just quickly identify, is there any apparent injury? Did the person experience a fall earlier and you didn't know it at the time, but maybe it actually resulted in an injury that could now be causing this pain that the individual, your loved one, can't identify? Consider always that they might have a urinary tract infection, right? That is very, very typical. And for any of you who've had one, you can appreciate how completely miserable they are. But being unable to do anything to resolve it, and really being unable to even identify it, it can create quite a problem with their behavior. So undiagnosed urinary tract infections, as your loved one's physical condition changes, consider, do their dentures fit well anymore? Do their shoes fit well anymore? Are they comfortable? Do they have arthritis? Are they having other conditions that would be sort of unseen to the eye? So it's a lot for us to try to figure out, but you're going to solve your person, okay? Again, as I said, do they have indigestion? Do they have constipation? All of these are miserable things if you can't do anything to mitigate them on your own. Of course, we always want to be mindful if they've got multi-pharma, if there's a new med or some med interactions to be considering. So you really want to be kind of 360 aware of their whole situation. And recognize that their needs might not be recognized because they might not have an ability or a capacity to articulate it. So if any of those things would require a physician or a provider's intervention or evaluation, that's job one, okay? Making the person comfortable, but getting them evaluated so that if it was something that was medically indicated, you could get that turned around. The second thing to take thought of is, okay, maybe we've been able to put to the side any sort of physical something. Well, what if it's something that's a discomfort to them in the space that they're in? Okay, I hate tags on the back of my shirts. They make me nuts. So I'm gonna be sure to put that into my care plan for myself. Make sure I don't have tags poking me at all hours of the night and day, because you can see how that could be a terrific annoyance and make me crappy, but I might not be able to articulate it. So it could be something as seemingly simple as that. It could also be something environmental. Maybe there's a glare from the light or a breeze from the fan or any number of things that you might not find discomforting, but they might. So just kind of, again, put yourself in their shoes. Think too, I always think like after I've been on a plane for a little while, how I get my knees all kind of knotted up and they ache. Do they need to stretch? Do they need to lay down? Just take stock of their situation very thoroughly and consider what might be making them uncomfortable. And then adjust accordingly. Now, as you're doing that, of course, you're doing it in a way that's just calming, and you're talking, and they might not be, or they might be. They might be persisting on something that you know isn't it. They might be like me. I might be saying, you know, my tag is so annoying. Well, maybe you know my tags aren't even in my shirt anymore. So you might be inclined to reason with me. How productive is that? Anybody think that that's our best approach? Yeah, almost never.
We try that. We just can't.
If we all got like points for as many times as we tried, but no. So instead of reasoning, instead of using logic, become fascinated in what they're trying to share with you. Because it might not, in fact, be true, but there might be a nugget in there that's very helpful to you, if not today, then in the future. One of the very keen examples that we give is people who are at home or in a community, a senior living community, and they say, I want to go home. Does that ever happen? Have you guys ever heard, I want to go home? So sometimes well-intended family and caregivers will say, well, you are home. This is your new home. You're home now. See, all your lovely things are here. That's the reality of the situation, but that's not their reality. But by assuming that we think they mean the home they last lived in, maybe with their family or their husband or what have you, we might be completely assuming incorrectly. So as opposed to saying, you are home now, or you can't go there anymore. Remember, you're not safe there anymore. You have Alzheimer's. Okay, how does that feel? Like crap, doesn't it? Yeah, there's so much about this disease that gives us the opportunity to remind them that they're wrong. So don't do that. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for you. And it does not feel good for them to be constantly reminded, don't you remember, you have Alzheimer's. You're wrong again. You know? So don't do that. Instead, meet them exactly where they are and learn from them. I want to go home. Tell me about that. Smile, open face, open posture. Tell me about that. What are they meaning when they're saying home? 9 times out of 10, what they're meaning and what you're thinking are not going to be the same. We had a woman who said, I have to go home, I have to go home. She was so agitated and increasingly agitated. That was her quote unquote behavior. She was acting out through this agitation of needing to go home. Well, when we talked to her, we found out that in her mind, her folks were at home and she had a curfew that she was about to break and she was going to get a licking. She was anxious and her dad was stern. It was so illuminating in a number of respects. You know, we were able to work with the family to go, don't respond to the 90-year-old her, respond to the who she is in that moment. And it might sometimes be a 16-year-old her who's busting curfew. It might be a 30-some-year-old her. If you take them at face value at what you see and what you're expecting them to be thinking, you're going to miss out on a lot of little jewels about their life that they might not be able to share with you because they might not be top of mind for them, but that might be where they're at in that moment, okay? So you might find out things about her family, about her home growing up, and in fact, go to that place with them and say, tell me about that. Tell me about your bedroom. Did you walk to school? Did you take your own lunch? You will learn things. And as a caregiver, that will make your relationship richer, whether you're a family caregiver or a caregiver who does this professionally, okay? Do you see how I go on tangents? Sorry. But it is fascinating. It is fascinating, and it will enrich your relationship. Finally, when you've been able to resolve the tag in her collar or the, don't worry, we'll get you home in time for curfew, when you're able to resolve that, then redirect in that gentle way toward an activity that you know from experience is going to be more enjoyable. So maybe in that case, it's like, oh my gosh, that reminds me, you haven't shown me a picture of your mom and dad in the longest time. I'd love to see that. And you can sit down now and pore over pictures for 5 minutes or an hour. You'll hear oftentimes the notion of the redirect. Have you heard that? It's like, just distract them. If you just distract them without having first understood what's going on for them, you haven't really helped. It's called the validation theory. If you just go, oh, I'm sorry, you seem really upset. Let's go have ice cream. Well, you might, kind of go to the ice cream, but I won't have heard what's going on for you and I won't have helped address it, okay? We all love to be understood, don't we? None of us likes to be misunderstood. That never feels good. So that's what we're trying to do here, is figure out what's going on and help understand it. Okay, so we've figured out maybe what's going on. We did a little evaluation to make sure it wasn't something more serious or medical that needed to be considered. And then we figured out what environmentally or physically maybe we could do to address it. And maybe what we did worked, or maybe what we tried to do to address it didn't work. And maybe then we try something else. But when we're done, we stop, and in your book, step number 4 says, make note. Make note. What worked? What was the trigger? What was the way that you were successful in addressing it? What were some things that maybe you tried that weren't successful in addressing it? What was the outcome? This helps you prepare for the next time that this is going to happen. And it might not play out in that exact same way, but it gives you more in your toolkit. And that's really what this is about. You need a pretty massive toolkit for this disease and the duration of this disease. So by taking stock, making note, going, okay, well, you know, it was the tag in her shirt. Okay, so make note of that and fix it and assure me that you've fixed it and be connected to me. Because you might not be the only one providing my care. And now if somebody else comes along, they have to figure it out from scratch. They might not be as clever as you, right? So you could actually make it easier for somebody else who is part of the care team for your loved one by saying, look, here's some cues, here's some things that create some communication through behavior, and here's some of the ways that we have found to address them successfully, and here's some things that we did that did not work. Okay? So we're going to actually, I gotta tell you, this is a great group, and it's the largest group we've done this for. So normally we spend some time talking one by one about different scenarios, and we address what's going on in that scenario and how we might better respond to it. What we're going to do today is I'm going to ask you to just do at your table one of the scenarios. So there's 5 different scenarios. I might need my notes for this. One is on aggression, one is on suspicion, one is on wandering behavior, one is on repetition. Missing one. What's the last one? Anxiety and agitation. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you're right here in the front, keeping me on track. So what I'm going to invite you to do at your table, and I think we've got enough of you here that you can choose which one your table, maybe choose one that feels relevant to your situation. And spend a little time reading the vignette, and we're going to just probably take about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see how the energy is. Read the vignette and then walk through the steps. What's going on? How do you connect with the person? How do you respond to the situation? And what worked and what didn't work and what could you do differently next time? All right, I have a feeling we could spend a lot longer on this. Let me first thank you for your willing involvement in that. I'm the first one to hate what I call forced fun. And so all of those sort of activities in group settings to me are forced fun. But you guys did it, and I appreciate it. The other thing that I want to point out is that you have essentially taken part in a mini support group setting just by virtue of having these conversations with others who share your experience. And isn't there something really comforting about knowing you don't have to explain the whole crazy, or you could explain the whole crazy and they're not going to think differently of you. And that's the beauty of a support group. You're going to get quality resource information. And Missoula is really fortunate to have some high quality support groups. And we've got information on that, and I know our counterparts at Missoula Aging Services do as well. So that was my spiel on support groups. Who did the very first one? It was the one on anxiety and agitation. Raise your hand for me if your group talked about that one. You're all reluctant, like I'm going to call on you, which I am. Okay. So let's just quickly review the situation for those who didn't do the anxiety and agitation one. Just briefly, this is a woman, Anne, that many of you have met in the vignettes that you had. And here she is pacing the hallways at home in the evenings, and she's saying, I need to go, I need to go. And she won't even stop walking for meals. Her family gives her sandwiches to eat while she's walking, and she uses a cane, but she's getting blisters on her feet, and she's lost weight because she's not eating. Her family asks her to sit down, and as soon as she does, she's up again immediately out of her seat and pacing, pacing, pacing. Anne has worked for 40 years as a nurse on the night shift, and her agitation begins in the evening. Her shoes were worn, and she appears to be in pain as she walked. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our little 4-step process, right? So the first one is detect and connect. So what are some things that we can identify about what Anne is experiencing?
Why are a new pair of shoes?
So buy her a new pair of shoes. Detect.
Nursing shoes.
Buy her nursing shoes. That's genius. Because what did you identify in there as we're doing the detect and connect? What are some clues that we could surmise from the situation, from the circumstances around it? Sorry?
She thinks she's on night shift.
Chances are really good she thinks she's on night shift. If we didn't know or we didn't pay attention to the fact that she was a nurse who worked nights forever, that might have been an important point lost on us, right? What are some other things maybe that as we're detecting and connecting? You said buy her new shoes. Clearly she's uncomfortable. What about the eating thing? What do you think might be going on there? Not time to eat, right? We also don't know, or she's losing weight. Do her dentures even fit her anymore? That can be so uncomfortable.
Not getting enough nutrition.
She's definitely not getting enough nutrition, which could also imply all kinds of other physical things if she's not getting enough like liquids and nourishments, right? What are some things that we might know about the time of day, besides the fact that she was a night shift nurse for years and years? What do we know about the time of day? Sundowners. You guys have heard about this? It's true, isn't it? And we can pretend that it isn't true, or we could wish that it wasn't true, but it doesn't change what is their experience. And so how do we address this? So we've detected and we've connected. We've done kind of a physical evaluation, and we were good. We did it pretty quickly. And we addressed the physical issues first, but how do we connect with her emotionally? How do we connect with Anne in the setting? What are some things we could do? Yeah? Talk to her like a fellow nurse. My gosh, isn't that so tied up in who we are, what we've done? I bet we could learn a lot from Anne as a fellow nurse, couldn't we? About what it was like to practice for 40 years, about the changes that she saw just during her career. Joan, thank you. We could, is it?
We could pace
Joan,
with her.
we could pace with her. Isn't that very different than saying, come here, sit down? And she's back up and out of her chair, right? I saw something, yeah.
We were going to walk with her also and ask, where are we going? Join her.
Exactly. Hey, where are we off to? We are going to learn things from her if we enter her world, right? Many of you know this story. My father-in-law had dementia. He'd been an old-time country doc for years and years. And in the middle of the night, now they lived in Texas and we didn't. In the middle of the night, we would get calls at midnight. And it was Dr. Cabrera's, it was Grandpa's wife. And she said, he's doing it again. And my husband would go, put him on the phone with me. And Dr. Cabrera would get on the phone and my husband would go, Dad, what's going on? So the first thing he always did was kind of assess it. What do you think is going on? And he'd repeat it. He'd be so affirming. Okay, I understand. You need to go to the hospital. You need to see your patients. That was making Dr. Cabrera anxious every evening, just like Anne, our nurse, right? And he'd say, okay, Dad, I understand. He was doing this by phone. I understand. You need to go to the hospital and see your patients. Now, here's where my husband would have a little fun with it. He would say, well, Dad, you know I'm a doctor. My husband is not a doctor. But Dr. Cabrera always wanted one of the kids to be a doctor. And he'd go, you're a doctor. My son's a doctor. So he spent a minute in that space. It was a lie, but it was affirming, right? And he'd say, and now it's midnight, right? He'd say, and Dad, I'm at the hospital right now seeing my patients. But as soon as I'm done, I'll come get you and we'll go see your patients. That was not going to happen. But what did happen was that Dr. Cabrera went, you're going to come get me? Yes, I will. So brush your teeth, comb your hair, and I'll be there as soon as I can. Okay, you're coming to get me? We'll go see my patients? Yes. And it soothed him. And then he was able to be redirected to maybe going to sleep, right? So my point in that is, if you're creative, if you set aside the rational part of this world that we spend so much of our time in, and you go where they are, you'll connect, okay? I'm not encouraging you to lie, although there is a notion called the therapeutic fib that can be well employed in the care of a loved one with this disease. And it's actually a more compassionate approach, okay? All right, so anything else about this situation with Anne? Yeah.
I just wondered that if you told her it was time to sit down and chart,
Yeah.
and you could write it for what?
And you could chart and she could chart? Nice.
Create a evening routine for Anne, so that would make it easier.
So create an evening routine. And what would be some things that maybe would be really helpful to do in that evening routine?
Allow her to do what she wants that she normally do on her shift
On
at
shift.
night. You know, come in and sit with you and talk about what she usually does. You know,
Yeah.
or-
Let her help direct it even.
Yes.
Yeah. Because so much of our identity is caught up in that, and when that's no longer validated or real, I love that approach. Nan, you were going to add.
What did she do on her days off?
Right? We could explore that with her. We could explore that with her. There was a family who had their mother doing a lot of laundry. And they said people thought ill of us because we had my mom washing a lot of laundry. But it gave her a sense of purpose. She was capable, so it made her feel competent. Have you guys seen the bubble story, the gentleman? I'll tell you quickly, I'm watching the clock. He was a gentleman that had no job anymore, and so his daughter was very ingenious, and she said, the people at the bubble store, they need you to pop their bubbles. They do? Yes, they do, and they're willing to pay you to do it. So watch it, it's out on YouTube. She had to buy bales and bales of bubbles, and at one point he goes, I think I need more money. They're not paying me. But it's a perfect example of how just figuring out what they're going to respond to and meeting them there. Let's just, I want to touch the final point of that, and that is step number 4. Make note of what worked. Make note of what didn't work. Hopefully as caregivers, you're all getting something that seems like respite. So somebody else is going to need to know what you did and did effectively and what worked and what did not work, okay? Who did the confusion and suspicion? Anybody? You guys did. Okay, I was going to say, we'll do it together, but you guys did. So Anne's family comes to visit, and the evening begins, and she gets very suspicious that people are trying to get in her house. They're watching her through the big picture window. She becomes suspicious of her family for not making the people go away, and that they must be all in cahoots with each other. So what did you guys do to detect and connect with her? What were some things that you thought, okay, how do we identify what's going on for Anne? How did you take stock of the situation? Or anybody?
Well, I think there's somebody out there, so let's go check it out.
Let's go look. Let's go look. Terry, you had something.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, just sort of what we were talking about is just sort of checking, sort of seeing the issue, how is the whole situation coming together in that.
Exactly, so sort of evaluate. This is actually a pretty typical scenario that comes up because you can appreciate if their visual perception is off, if their actual perception is off, and now as the night is drawing in and they can see their reflection in the glass, that could look like people. That could be really scary. And a lot of what comes out as aggression and agitation and all these things is really fear, and it makes so much sense if you consider it from that perspective. So what are some things that we could do in this situation? We were able to identify physically she's okay, but there is this thing happening in her space. How do we mitigate that? What's that? What if we close the blinds? What if we said, oh my gosh, that's not good. Let's close these blinds. You don't have to say, yeah, you're right. You can also say, that must be really scary. Let's take care of this. Let's close these blinds, okay? Now, what would you, and you wouldn't just close the blinds and walk away, would you? What if it was a small child who was scared? What would you do in that situation? You'd sit with them. You would sit with them, you would be calm with them, you would validate their fear, and then you would find something more enjoyable to do together, okay? And move on. Now, in terms of making notes for yourself, because you know this is going to happen again, maybe tomorrow night, What are you going to know in advance to do? And what notes are you going to leave for somebody else so that they don't have to create this situation again, right? So that's it. That's an everyday easy. We have a family that shared with us a story that they invited us to share with others. And it was a TV. The TV was in the home. The TV has been for a very long time a great source of enjoyment for their mother. And frankly, a pastime for their father. She could watch a lot of Wheel of Fortune. One day, totally out of the blue, those people on the TV became strangers in her home. And it was real to her. And it was frightening, and she got very agitated and aggressive. So what did her daughter do? Turn the TV off. Turn the TV off. And hopefully, she also said, Mom, I get how scary that must be. Helped calm her, helped redirect her. But the mom still saw the TV screen. And for whatever reason, that still to her represented people in her home. So the daughter covered it with a blanket. Problem solved. Now, for some people, maybe just turning off the TV would have been enough. So it was a perfect example of just figure out what's going on for them and then be creative in how you attempt to address it. But always be validating, reassuring, and let them know that you're in this together, that they're not in this alone, okay? How about aggression? Who did that one? Anybody? Some people way at the back. Hello. So quickly, this is Anne's husband, Bill, and he's at the back of the room, and he's leaning against the wall, and his arms are crossed, and he's watching TV, and she walks in. This seems like it comes out of nowhere for sweet Anne, the nurse. She says sharply to him, "You aren't the boss here." And he ignores the comment, continues to watch TV. She comes closer, raises her voice. "You can't tell me what to do." And when he doesn't respond, she comes up and hits him on the arm with a balled fist. Prior to her dementia symptoms, she was quite calm and would never have exhibited this behavior. Lately, though, her outbursts are becoming more frequent. She continues to come at him. He retreats from her, locks himself in the bathroom to avoid conflict. He doesn't have a cell phone, so he doesn't have a way to communicate. And both of them are avid hunters since they were young, so there are guns in the home. Bill's removed all the ammunition. Okay, so this is actually not that outlandish. And there are a lot of guns in homes in Montana, right? So first of all, we want to realize that just because she hasn't done anything doesn't mean she wouldn't do anything. So let's take stock of this situation real quickly. How do we kind of identify what are some of the precipitating factors here? What's going on? She walks in, he ignores her. What does that do you think? Kind of turns up the volume on that whole thing, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And then he continues to watch TV and isn't paying attention to her. She comes closer, raises her voice. She hits him. So the whole thing just escalated really quickly. So what are your thoughts in terms of how do we connect with Anne in this situation? What would you do if you were Bill, or what would you advise Bill to do in this situation? Anybody?
Take this course.
Say that again so we can all hear.
I said, take this course.
Take this course. So we'll invite Bill here. We also have an online version and a by phone version if Bill can't get out of the house. Turn off the TV. Exactly.
Engage her in conversation.
Engage her in conversation. Exactly. And don't like escalate with her, but kind of meet her where she is and then bring the situation, the energy of the situation down. But even just by being against the wall, he wasn't creating that eye contact, was he? And we don't know what set her off, but he wasn't taking, he didn't have the capacity in that moment to really take the time maybe to figure out what were those triggers, right? So he locks himself in the bathroom. And now we think maybe Anne's gone to get a gun. Okay. This is a situation that could play out in a number of ways and does with respect to vehicles that they maybe shouldn't be driving, but here are the keys and there is the car, and maybe that's a way that this aggression plays out. So let's go ahead first and address what are the physical issues. Okay, so we don't have any reason to believe that Anne has any sort of a physical condition, although we don't know. We haven't really teased out, is it a medication issue or any of those, but we would take the time to do that. We're screening the environment. Are there other excess noises? I know we've already got the TV off now, and I think that's a help. Is there a change in the schedule? Is there anything different that can be precipitating this? And then we have to figure out what's going on for her emotionally. And again, as we said, a lot of time that aggression comes from a place of fear, a place of pain, alarm, fear. So we want to make sure that none of that's going on, and we need to be reassuring, and that's the thing that I think we addressed that Bill wasn't doing. This situation is important because firearms are involved, and now we're first responders to get involved. If they're not made aware that this person has diminished mental capacity, that they have this extenuating circumstance, they could see a gun, they could perceive threat, and things could escalate really markedly and badly, right? So some of the advice that a lot of the advice that we give to families is, if you can, don't have guns in the home. That gentleman should have some sort of a cell phone, some sort of a way that he's not locked in a bathroom. And to the extent that you can make neighbors aware, that you can make first responders aware, it all depends on your community. But this is not something that does well as a secret. And so that when people would be called to respond, they would know how to respond from a place of compassion and understanding and caring. A group that we are very anxious to get in front of for this very purpose is our first responders, because they have a significant challenge, and lacking this insight, they may not respond right. Yeah.
So in Missoula County, we also have a program called Smart 911.
Smart 911.
So you can register with 911 to let them know that you have someone in your family or in a nursing home that has a dementia, so that they have that in the system. And it doesn't, you can say where they are. My mom called 911 from a facility one time. They showed up in the middle of the night because there were people in her room.
Sure.
And so we have her signed up with 911. But if they don't know your information, it only comes up on the 911 screen if you call from that number. And then it will say, Mrs. So-and-so has this, and, please, and it can also give, like, if she's in a facility, it can give the number for the people down the hall.
That is wonderful to know. I made note of it. Smart 911. Thank you, Jean, for contributing that. I appreciate it. I'm doing a quick time check, and I see that we are getting really, really close to wanting to wrap this up so that we can hear from our panel this evening. I see a hand in the back.
Speaking of first responders, it was just about a week ago that Missoula did a crisis intervention training for police officers, probation officers, mental health facility people who might respond. It was generalized that there was a piece on responding to people with dementia. Obviously, if you're the one calling 911 or you're the person that the first responder is going to talk to, you have to give them as much information as possible. But that was just like a week ago here in Missoula to help so that it doesn't end badly, so that you can have more tools to assess before you have to.
Thank you for contributing that. That's exactly right. And just to know that this is a possibility. Right. Thank you for mentioning that. Let's spend a couple minutes on the next two topics before we wrap up and move on. The repetition one. Who spent some time on that? This is one most of us could have spent some time on. And this is a pretty typical because of the short-term memory loss that people with Alzheimer's experience. So here Anne has been concerned about a visit from her daughter. Katie is not scheduled to visit for another 2 weeks, and Anne has begun repeatedly to ask Bill, when is she coming? She asks several times throughout the day, every day, and this has begun to wear on Bill. Now he finds himself answering impatiently, ignoring her questions, and at the same time, Anne is going to the bathroom much more frequently than she did before, every 10 to 20 minutes. So who saw that clue? Loud and clear, right? And so obviously we start there to alleviate her discomfort. But even without that last indicator of a possible urinary tract infection, what are your thoughts about how we maybe could detect and connect with Anne? Clearly this is on her mind, right? Absolutely, absolutely. Let's get her some care for that urinary tract infection, absolutely. And then instead of being impatient with Anne for asking incessantly about Katie's visit, instead of ignoring Anne's questions, what might we do instead?
What are you going to do when she gets here?
What are you going to do when she gets here? What are you most looking forward to doing with her? What are some things you used to enjoy doing? You could literally ask it every time differently, but it puts the responsibility of being creative on you. Know that when you answer it differently, chances are really good it's going to invoke another response from her. A response that allows you to build a conversation and not just have a series of really kind of frustrating visits, right? My dad does that every day, 4 times a day, calls and says, now whose birthday's coming up? And I could be frustrated, I could ignore the call, but I think it's gonna take 3 minutes. That's a long call. It's gonna take 3 minutes. Well, Dad, it's this birthday. Okay, I got that written down. Okay, well, what are you thinking? Well, what did you get for your birthday when you were 16? If I got time, I'll go there. But if I don't, I'll just answer the question and make it every time a new question out of respect. All right, so you see me going quickly. I want to talk about wandering just really quickly. 60% of people with Alzheimer's or related dementia will wander. Even if they've never wandered, that doesn't mean they're not at risk for wandering. They don't intend to be wandering. They might think if they go through that door, they're going to the bathroom, and they might find themselves on the street with no ability to turn around and find their way home. If people who wander aren't found within 24 hours, the odds of them being found alive go down appreciably. So the best thing you can do is try to keep them safe in their home. And some of the ways that we can do that, well, first of all, let me back up. I'm going too quick. First of all, we know this. Wandering can also be precipitated or provoked by pain or discomfort, by the desire to get away from something. So it can be purely happenstance. They can literally just take the wrong door, or they can be trying to leave a situation, a discomfort that they're having, a discomfort that they're having with a person. So here again, we need to take stock of the situation. We need to be the detective and figure out what's going on and what is prompting this now desire to be going and leaving. You can find sometimes that it's out of boredom or anxiety or frustration. So to be reassuring, to be pretty vigilant, to secure your home, and we have all of these tools through our helpline. It's an 800 number you can call anytime, day or night, and they'll literally provide you tools and resources about how do you do a safety check on your home? How do you safeguard your home? What are some of the newest technologies available to keep your loved ones safe? We also have caregiver jewelry for our medical alerts, so that if you're the caregiver and the person that you're caring for is at home and you're in an accident, how do the first responders know that you've got somebody at home waiting for you that has this special need? So those are all really important pieces of information available through our 800. It's 800-272-3900, and it's literally on every piece of brochure that we give you, okay? There's never a cost for our 800 number. There's never any judgment. They build a case file that's confidential. So once they've heard what it is that's your family situation and they've helped you address it in as long or as short as you need, they'll offer to either email you or hard copy mail you additional information, and then they'll keep that on file. So with the next time you call, you don't have to start from scratch. They'll say, Joan, tell me, how's it going? I know we tried a few tricks to make your home safe. How's that going? Well, now can we talk about the medication management? Because maybe having the meds easily available is another risk that we want to consider. So they're not going to hit you over the head all at once with everything. But no, there's an awful lot to this conversation, and this is a multi-year journey. And you as caregivers have the very most significant job in terms of providing the care to your loved one and then also providing the care to yourselves. And I had a gentleman one time say to me, I called your helpline and they asked me all about me. They didn't even ask me almost at all about my mom. And I said, oh, I get that. Because the better you're doing as caregivers, the better the people in your care are going to do. So you're our first priority, because we know if you're doing good and if you've got these tools and resources, they'll do better, okay? So take this home, spend a little time on it. If you like getting information online, go there. You're going to find additional information about everything we've talked about and more. You've got opportunities in this community that are abundant, thanks to our partners at Missoula Aging Services, our partners here at the Senior Center, our partners on campus, Terry. And we are always here for you. As I said, it's a long journey, and the Alzheimer's Association doesn't want you alone on it, okay? So I've got my card. We recently had reinvented these beautiful cards that say, thank you for your patience. The person that I'm with has Alzheimer's, another type of dementia, and might need a little more patience. So help yourself to these. They're at the desk. It's a handy little thing to slip to a shop clerk or a restaurant worker or anybody, a family member. That's just an example of the types of tools and resources we want to equip you with for the journey, okay? So the next thing I'm pleased to do is introduce to you two young ladies. Where did you guys go? Madison and Barrett and Dr. Dick Blank. These three folks have traveled this journey and have come out the other end of it, and I think that's an important thing to realize too. People do come out the other end of it. And they are here today to share with us what was their journey. And with that, go ahead, I can't show the picture. That's it. They sent me a beautiful picture of their grandma, and I can't share it with you, I'm sorry. Okay, so they're each going to share kind of their perspective, the role they played, the lessons they learned, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions if you'd like to learn more from them. Miss Madison.
Hello everyone, my name is Madison Wakefatz, as you can see on the card. I'm 18 and a senior at Hellgate High School. My grandma, her name is Patricia Blake, and my grandpa, and I kind of had a different story. I wasn't the main caregiver. I witnessed a lot of that, so Grandpa and my mom were the big caretakers, and Barrett and I, our grandma had Alzheimer's. She had symptoms of that before we were born, and so we never really got to have, I guess, the traditional relationship with that. And, that was difficult, but we still got to go see Grandma and spend time with her, but there was, different instances with that. So, one of the, I guess, hardest part was watching the struggles that my mom and Grandpa had to go through with that, because once you witness it, there's always ups and downs and good days and bad days. And we would go visit her and have dinner with her at one of her care, like the Springs, which is the care center she spent the later years of her life. And there were some stories with interactions with other people there, and it was interesting to see those interactions too, because there's everybody has different experiences with that, so I think it was some, as I said, good days and bad days with there as well.
Hi, I'm Barrett. I'm a sophomore at Hellgate High School, and like Madison said, I never truly ever really got to meet my true grandma. I only ever really got to meet her during their sickness, but I felt like I met her through all the stories that my mom told me and my grandpa told me, and she was a pretty amazing, cool lady. And so it was always really sad that I never got to truly meet her, and I feel quite unfortunate about that, but I did get to spend some time with her, and but my favorite moments with her was when we spent dinner at the Springs, and they were really awesome. And not all the time, she would forget us a lot of the time when we would go to meet her, and so every time we'd have to reintroduce ourselves, but I remember mostly she'd always come back and say, "Oh, look at you, look at those little beautiful girls," and she had no idea who we were, but it was amazing that she thought we were beautiful every single time we met her, even though she didn't know who we were.
Actually, I think they're kind of beautiful myself. One of the reasons that I'm happy we have an opportunity to do this is that I'd like to show people that you can come out of the other end of this journey showing a lot of respect for each other. And I think the thing that I would feel that came out most definitely is the love we have for each other and the love that we have for my wife and their grandmother. And this is not a love that sometimes the person with dementia can return. So it's pretty unilateral. And I think it's very important if you have every family members, if you have little children or whatever, involve them. Don't try to protect them. Let them work their way through it. These are smart young ladies, and as you can see, I think they've turned out pretty well. One of the tools that my daughter came up with was this quilt. And you might want to take a look at it. Each member of the family did a panel of the quilt. And we'll leave it up here for you to look at. And this allowed each one of them, and remember, they were only 3, 4, 5 years old when this went on. But they did their own thing. They were involved, and I do think, and you guys can comment on that as well, I do think the fact that they were involved helped heal. It certainly helped me. And as a caregiver, as the primary caregiver, get help. Get other people involved. Don't get isolated yourself. Because all these little tricks that Lynn was telling you don't work when you're so worn out that you can't think straight. And you're going to do a lot better job if you take some time off, if you involve other people, if you let other people know that you know you're tired and you need some love and some support. If you do that, I think that's great. Lynn mentioned I got my wife one of those metal alert bracelets because she wandered. She didn't like it. It wasn't very fashionable. And it is somewhere. And somebody's going to find that 50 years from now and wonder where it came from. I have no idea. So the one problem is that they are always thinking too. And they're sometimes ahead of you during the process. So come up and take a look at the quilt. You can see our feelings and how it worked. I think it helped.
Barrett's quilt is very especially hilarious to me because her spelling is an interesting collection, and she says some very nice things. My love is strong, and I think you don't. I don't know what it says after that, but I find that even just like Grandpa was saying with the support, no matter how many letters you use, you can still get that feeling from it.
So, does anyone have questions for our panelists? Questions about what the experience was like for young people to be involved in the process, or for Dick, who clearly was a consummate caregiver?
How many years was your span, Dick, from the time that Pat was diagnosed until she passed?
It was 10.5 years, but I would bet, as I look back, it probably was 12.5 years. I was clueless the first 2 and didn't even recognize what was going on. It took friends of ours to tell me what was going on. And that's one of the other things I mentioned is that it's a lot harder to figure things out because we were married a long time and very well adjusted to each other. So you tend to adjust and adapt, right?
Sure.
Therefore, the people with dementia, you say dementia, you tend to think that they're not smart. She was a smart lady, and I tell you, she could calm anybody, including me. So that's one of the things. So it was a 10.5 year journey. Actually, 5.5 years I cared for her at home. I finally wore out.
Yeah. One of the reasons, and I didn't share with you, that we worry so much about caregivers is because the toll that caregiving takes emotionally, financially, spiritually, physically, it literally leads to early demise in a caregiver, and if not early demise, then depression. So you all are worth caring for. Other questions? I know that I've invited Barrett and Madison and Dr. Blank to stick around after, because I find sometimes that's when the most rewarding conversations take place. So please feel free if you've got questions of myself or Alicia or any of our panelists. Thank you so much for making time to be with me. And these young ladies are going with me tomorrow to Big Sky High School, where we're talking to 80 sophomores. Not about this, other things, other things. Thank you.
Thank everyone for coming out for the workshop today. If you were a walk-in person and we don't have your email, and you would like us to have your email so we can alert you when Lynn comes back, please stop at the registration table. We also have a powerful tools for caregiver class starting in July, and I have flyers for that, as well as flyers for some of the support groups that are happening in Missoula for caregivers. So I invite you to stop by our table and the Alzheimer's table.
Just invite people to turn that in as well and help us.
Okay, and Lynn has also passed out evaluations. Please take a moment to fill that out for the Alzheimer's Association, and let's give Lynn a round of applause and our panel. Thank you. And please take home some veggies. There's some veggies and cookies left. Thank you.